Step two, after we've measured our 10 truths, we get our longevity score, is to intervene. And so this is where the 12-week challenge, and we've built this as a 12-week challenge because we want to uh, introduce people to habits, in a kind of fun way. But health is really about the long term. What we're hoping to do is impart the knowledge to the person going through the program so that they can then integrate these habits into their lifestyle going forward and do it with confidence, understand exactly why they're doing certain things, and then being able to retest and see if what they're doing is effective. Um, so people sign up to the challenge at theproof.com/living proof. This is zero cost, which I mentioned at the outset. It's made possible by partners. And there's email coaching along the way that we've kind of integrated into this. I'll just briefly touch on the habits. So there, across the 12 weeks, there's actually 12 habits that we're looking to introduce people to. And so I'll go through a few of these. We want people to optimize their protein intake, which means targeting a certain amount to support a healthy skeleton, to support strength goals, and also to reduce their risk of cardiovascular disease, improve cardiometabolic health, which really comes down to the source of that protein. So we have some goals in there. We want people to have a bias towards plant protein, for example. And I should add that each of these habits, they start off slow, and then over the 12 weeks, we're trying to progress them. Also, from a dietary point of view, we're drawing some focus to the type of fats that we're eating. We want to shift away from those foods that are really rich in saturated fats and instead lean more into sources of monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, which will affect not only ApoB and cholesterol levels, but will also affect insulin sensitivity and blood glucose. We have habits built around chrono nutrition and circadian biology. So the timing of our meals and light exposure. You might think, well, what is that? Why is that important? What does that relate to? We know there's a body of research showing that the timing of our meals affects insulin sensitivity. At different times of the day, we're better able to utilize nutrients. We know that the timing of our meals and light and nighttime light exposure affect our sleep. And sleep is a big predictor of mortality, but sleep also and sleep deprivation directly affects metabolic health. So that's why some of these things are included here. We have goals built around moderate intensity cardio and high intensity cardio. And the way that I think about these are they're slightly different stresses to the cardiovascular system. Moderate intensity cardio is really about stressing more of the peripheral systemic cardiovascular system, and then high intensity cardio more about stressing the lungs and the heart. There's some resistance training built into this because we want to make sure, as we age, there's age-related losses of muscle tissue and bone mineral density goes down. So what we want to do is we want to act in a way where we can attenuate some of that so we can stay strong, we can stay functional, and reduce our risk of having a fracture if we were to fall, which significantly increases someone's mortality risk. And then there's a couple of fun, neat things in there built around psychological well-being, life satisfaction, doing something joyful each day, perhaps something that you've been holding off on doing. We know that a big part of life satisfaction is the regret or lack of regret that you have at the end of your life. And what people tend to regret most is not things that society kind of pressures us into thinking are important, which is the job promotion, earning more money, these sorts of things, buying that bigger house. Usually regret is driven by the things you didn't do in your life that you always wanted to do that would have helped you step towards your ideal self. who you actually are. And that might be you never wrote poetry, but you loved it. You never painted for whatever reason. You had fear built around that, and you didn't carve out the time to paint or play the piano, all these sorts of things. And being of service. We know that if you look at the areas of the brain that are related to stress, we know that when you are of service to other people, those stress-related areas of the brain actually become dimmed. They dial down. And so being of service actually acts as a buffer to stress. So that's kind of, I guess, a little bit of an introduction or taste for the interventions. And we have this sheet for each of the 12 weeks. Perhaps some of you are actually in the current cohort. There's thousands of people that are doing it right now. And every day you can, for the 12 habits, you can say, yes, I nailed it. Emerging, I'm getting there. Or not yet, I need more time. One of the things that I've been working on is playing the guitar. You might be able to see, you can probably see it back there. I snapped a string this morning. Unfortunately, otherwise I might play a song for you, Stairway to Heaven, that I've been practicing, but maybe next time. Okay, so we test the 10 truths. We go through the 12 weeks to kind of introduce ourselves to these habits. We're focusing on what matters. We're not getting distracted by shiny objects. What do we do next? Step 3, we're going to retest. So we're going to retest the 10 truths. We're going to see how your longevity score has changed. And then we're going to refine. So your daily habits, we will refine your daily habits to focus on the things that matter for you. And I've underscored you, and I just mentioned this before. What we test is the same, but the interventions we focus more or less on will differ from person to person. And that's kind of illustrated here by these 2 different dartboards with different targets highlighted. Person A, person B. This was a nice quote that I thought was fitting from the author of The Alchemist. I'm sure some of you have read. Whenever you want to achieve something, keep your eyes open, concentrate, and make sure you know exactly what it is you want. No one can hit their target with their eyes closed. Oh, I think we managed to get through that with plenty of time for questions and time for me to get to the airport and fly to Austin for a podcast. There's 2 things I'd love you to do right now. If you think what I shared with you is interesting, if you'd like to get involved, then you can sign up to that 12-week zero cost Living Proof Challenge at theproof.com/living proof. Love to have you involved. There's an online community component as well. And if you want to hear me chatting with domain-specific experts, then you can subscribe to my podcast, The Proof. There's a catalog of episodes I've done, again, with people like Walter Willett and Gary Fraser, Rich Roll, more, and lots of cool new episodes coming out in the near future each week. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for that, Simon. Really appreciate the information that you shared with us. For the audience who are interested in asking Simon questions, you can raise your hand in Zoom. We'll put instructions for how to do so in the chat. And we don't take questions directly from the chat, so please raise your hand if you'd like to ask Simon a question. So how did you come upon this approach for health?
How did I come up on this approach? Well, I realized that, I mean, I kind of spoke earlier about the fact that many people were just asking me where to start. And so I don't think our problem is that we don't know what to do. It's just very hard to do the things that we know. And so what I wanted to do was kind of, I guess, reverse engineer something and say, hey, if our goal is to get to 70, 80, 90 in good health, what are the things that really matter? So we can see that in the peer-reviewed literature. What's predicting disease and mortality and psychological well-being? Okay, cool. Well, of those things, which are the ones that we can easily measure, that we can intervene on? And then I just think that's a really cool framework to give to people to say, hey, there's so many different distractions and things you're going to come across online. But what I want to do is just shift your focus to what I know is predictive of your long-term health. And then I'm gonna help you actually move or shift those things into a favorable direction. And in doing so, we're going to improve your chance of living more years without disease.
Thank you. And if we get all these benchmarks and these test results in the right, with the right spectrums, what should we see in our daily lives?
That's a great question. We're pulling together right now the data from people going through the program. So one of the things, Michael, that I want to know is like all of this is based on evidence in the peer-reviewed literature. That's very clear. But one of the things that I'm excited about, and this is I'd call this our version 1.0 or almost beta version. It's currently in 100 and something page PDF. I have a team building this out to more of an app type form, so it makes it even easier. Because what I'm really interested in is two things. What happens when you stack these habits on top of each other to the biomarkers? And then what is the average adherence like? And from that, I get two pieces of really good information. One is if you go through this program and you adhere kind of to 60% of it, here's the typical results you should from ApoB, VO2 max, all these things that we know matter. We're not running a long-term trial here where I can say, here's your risk of dying or not. We're not yet at that stage. If we get the funding to do that, it'd be amazing. But we're pulling off other randomized controlled data that has done that. And then secondly, once understanding adherence, what can I do? What can I manipulate, change? How can I build in features to help improve adherence? Because really, I think the success of this is going to come down to how consistent someone can do it. They don't need to be perfect, but we need some level of consistency. So I'm not sure if that really answered your question, but I guess all that is to say over the next year or two, we're going to have a lot more data.
Great, thank you. And well, how many people have gone through this? I know that you're just rolling this out. You just said that this is kind of 1.0. How many people have been doing this protocol, and what kind of results are you seeing?
So we're in week 12 now of a group where we had almost 70,000 people download the PDF. We don't know exactly how many of those people went into it. Again, maybe we should have put a little bit more thought into tracking all this. We were really just saying, hey, we've got all this information. I don't want to wait a year to get it out to people. I want to get it out. Once we have the app, we can track things a little better. But I suspect we have between 20 to 25,000 people that are going through the program. And what we're currently building out now on the website so we can capture this is we have people inputting their 10 truths from baseline, and we're going to get them to put it in at week 12. So we can have internally data that says, for this gender and this age, here's typical results. And then also one of our partners who's helped with some of the blood tests, which won't be the whole cohort, but some of it, we can get anonymous data that shows, here's the typical pre and post change to ApoB, triglycerides, fasting blood glucose, etc.
And are you measuring feedback from people? So you got started with people didn't really know where to begin with all this amazing information out there. Are you getting feedback from these people or are you planning on getting feedback from these people on, did this make it easier for them to move forward with leveraging all the knowledge that you've synthesized into this process?
Oh yeah. So there'll be surveys so that we're understanding, like, where are we doing well? How can we hold someone's hand better? Or where can we do better? understanding if this is making it easier or not is crucial for us. And particularly, as I said, we're trying to transition from a PDF, which, you know, getting through a 100-page PDF is no joke. You have to be highly motivated. So I'm aware that we probably lost a lot of people because the solution is not simple enough yet. So that's certainly something that I'm kind of aware of and know that we need to work on.
And if someone is eating, is this designed specifically for people who struggle getting started, or is this more about optimization? So for someone's eating, a whole food plant-based diet, they got a good exercise routine, their sleep is on point, they got community support and purpose. Do you suggest that this person also should be using this technology in order to optimize their health?
Yeah, I suggest start by testing the 10 truths and see where you land. We've had a lot of people already provide us a feedback that said, hey, I thought I was doing everything right. I had my bone mineral density scan done and I have osteoporosis. They had no idea. Now they understand that they have osteoporosis, but not only that, they have a roadmap with the interventions that can help them from a nutrition and an exercise point of view to hopefully improve that condition and lower their risk of fractures and falls.
Thanks. And I just want to be mindful of the time that you need to leave.
Sure.
What is that?
I mean, if we can spend another 20, 30 minutes and I've got time to get to the airport.
Perfect. And we have had some teachers talk about like the dangers of over testing, especially when someone is asymptomatic.
Mm-hmm.
People like Pam Popper and Michael Greger's done videos on getting people tested on certain things, then it brings them into the medical field, and then they have procedures done that could be counterproductive. What have what does your research suggest on that? Do you agree with that? Is that a risk?
I think it depends on what you're testing. If you're just testing everything under the sun, sure. I totally agree. If it's not a validated test and there's no evidence that you can improve it, but reducing these, I said there's a big laundry list of tests, right? And there is, like, you can go out and do microbiome tests, and I can tell you they're not validated. Your results don't tell you a lot about the things that you should be eating more or less of. It's not really going to tell you anything over and above the guidelines. So I think those things are typically a waste of money. But there are I would argue, and if we were to go through the 10 truths, I'd say that the tests are validated and there's significant peer-reviewed data that if you implement X, Y, Z, you can improve them. And so I think it can be powerful to actually measure those and understand where your baseline's at. Otherwise, you don't really know what's happening under the hood. And for many people, it's motivating to see that they need to do some work in a certain area, and then they can focus on that intervention because they might be spending more time on nutrition, but the biomarkers that are affected most by nutrition are fine, and they have these blind spots. And the blind spots might be that they're not spending enough time on resistance training, for example. So I kind of agree with some of what Michael Greger would say there, but then I would push back a little bit respectfully.
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's a bit of an art to it also, right? You have to kind of, obviously the science thing, and they kind of put it out there, see how you respond to it, and then move from there. So I totally get that. And what tests should people absolutely avoid? What, you mentioned the microbiome, you said, there really wasn't, good indications on what to do with the information that you get. Are there tests that you've come across as you were doing your analysis of what tests to include that you were like, okay, I got to keep this test out of this. This might not be.
Look, also, I should just a caveat and say here, I'm not saying these are the only things that everyone should test, because sometimes on an individual level, there are specific tests that are warranted for that individual. But I mean, I mentioned the microbiome test that I don't think that helpful. I think a lot of the DNA genetic testing, some of it can be helpful, like for ApoE4, for example, could be helpful for some people to measure. LP little a, which is affected by genetics. We talk about that. Yeah. I would I would speak to someone's physician. I'm not a physician, so I don't want to go too deep into that.
Okay. And I'm gonna throw out to the
The
audience.
Dutch hormone testing I'd throw out there. I know that that's popular, but is not validated.
Okay. And well, are there any tests that are complete? Obviously, when people are, when different companies come up with different testing, that there could be something that's completely bunk, but there's a money incentive sometimes.
Right.
Obviously. Are there any tests you've come across that are just like you just said, this Dutch one that maybe like just there really is just no science behind it at all?
I mean, that one is certainly top of my list. I mean, then there are other ones, Michael, that are just difficult to interpret and can be highly volatile depending on the time of the day, right? You could measure cortisol, and if you measure it at 5 a.m. and your next blood test is at 10 a.m., it's very hard to interpret that because we have these kind of circadian rhythms that affect when hormones are high or low. Uh, but yeah, I think we covered the big ones: microbiome testing, DNA testing, Dutch hormone testing. These are trendy, they're sexy. Maybe one day microbiome testing will have evidence and it will be validated, but for now,